Heavenly Stories.
High voltage: what happens when a man chosen by God becomes the strongest warrior in the world, yet the weakest in his heart? The story of Samson is not just about battles and miracles. It's about temptation, betrayal, and the dangerous cost of pride. This isn't just history, it's a warning for every generation. High voltage. From the very beginning, Samson's life was marked by the extraordinary. His parents were ordinary Israelites, living under the shadow of Philistine oppression. The Philistines controlled their land, humiliated their people, and stripped away their freedom. But one night, an angel appeared to Samson's mother with a promise: her son would be unlike any other. He was destined to begin Israel's deliverance from the Philistines. The angel's message came with instructions. This child was to be set apart as a Nazirite, consecrated to God. That meant no wine, no unclean food, and most importantly, his hair must never be cut. His long hair would be the outward sign of an inner vow, a covenant with the Almighty. It would mark him as chosen. As Samson grew, people began to notice something different about him. He wasn't just strong, he was supernaturally strong. When other boys struggled to carry heavy stones, Samson could lift them with ease. When others wrestled for sport, no one could stand against him. But his power wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him at times, filling him with unstoppable might. The Philistines soon learned to fear the young man from Israel. Samson's first recorded act of strength was as terrifying as it was unbelievable. Walking alone near the vineyards of Timnah, he was suddenly attacked by a roaring lion. With no weapons, no armor, and no time to think, Samson grabbed the beast with his bare hands. In one shocking moment, he ripped it apart as easily as someone might tear a piece of cloth. The story spread like wildfire. A man who could kill a lion with his hands. Surely, he was unstoppable. But Samson's story was not only about strength, it was also about weakness. His heart was restless, often drawn toward forbidden desires. Against his parents' warnings, he pursued a Philistine woman in Timnah, wanting her as his wife. This decision would spark a chain of events that revealed both his power and his flaws. At the wedding feast, Samson posed a riddle to the Philistines. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. The answer was hidden in his earlier encounter with the lion. He had later found honey inside its carcass. When his bride betrayed him and revealed the answer to her people, Samson's anger exploded. He stormed away, humiliated and enraged. Soon after, he returned to find that his wife had been given to another man. The insult drove him into vengeance. In one of the most bizarre acts of retribution recorded in history, Samson captured 300 foxes, tied their tails together in pairs, and fastened burning torches between them. Releasing them into Philistine fields, he set the grain, vineyards, and olive groves ablaze. The land went up in flames, and the Philistines knew this was no ordinary enemy. Yet for all his victories, Samson's life carried a dangerous tension. His unmatched strength came from God, but his reckless choices came from himself. Every triumph was shadowed by his impulsive nature, his temper, and his weakness for women. The people of Israel looked at Samson and saw a hero. The Philistines looked at him and saw a threat. But heaven looked at him and saw a man torn between divine purpose and human weakness. Fire. And this is just the beginning. Because the most dramatic battles, betrayals, and heartbreaks of Samson's life were yet to come. His story would not only reveal the heights of God's power, but also the depths of human failure. Backhand index pointing right. Do you think strength alone can save a man? Or is it weakness that ultimately decides his destiny? Stay with us as we uncover the next chapter in Samson's life, where victory and tragedy collide. High voltage: power isn't always a blessing. Sometimes it's a warning. Samson had strength like no other, but his heart was restless, impulsive, and dangerously drawn to forbidden desires. What happens when a man chosen by God follows his own temptations? The answer is shocking, and it's coming next. High voltage. After the fiery vengeance with the foxes, Samson's name became a whispered terror among the Philistines. Their fields burned, their crops destroyed, and their egos wounded. But the boy who ripped a lion apart with his bare hands and unleashed flaming foxes was not done testing the limits of his power, or the patience of his people. Despite the destruction he caused, Samson's impulsive heart led him once again toward a dangerous temptation, a woman from the city of Gaza. The Philistines knew he was coming, and they plotted. They surrounded the city, waiting to ambush him, yet Samson, filled with the Spirit of the Lord, walked right through their midst, carrying the massive city gates on his shoulders, and left them on top of a hill outside the city. Imagine the sheer physical might, and the daring audacity, of a man defying an entire army, alone, with nothing but divine strength and courage. But with every incredible feat, the pattern repeated, his heart led him to reckless choices. He fell in love, or at least infatuated, with women who were part of the very people God had called him to fight against. This longing for forbidden love would become the thread of his greatest undoing. The most famous of these women was Delilah, whose name would become synonymous with betrayal. The Philistine rulers, frustrated and enraged by Samson's ongoing destruction, offered Delilah a fortune to discover the secret of his strength. 3 times she tried to coax it out of him, and 3 times Samson deceived her. His confidence, arrogance, and perhaps a subtle sense of invincibility blinded him. He thought, nothing can defeat me. My strength is mine, my secret untouchable. But the 4th time, temptation won. Delilah pressed and prodded, pleading and nagging, wearing down Samson's resolve. Finally, he revealed the truth, the secret of his unmatched strength lay in his hair. As long as he never cut it, the Spirit of the Lord would remain with him, making him stronger than any man on earth. But if it were cut, his strength would leave him like a candle snuffed out in the wind. This revelation sealed his fate. Delilah called for the Philistine soldiers while Samson slept. They cut his hair, and suddenly, the Spirit of the Lord departed from him. The mighty hero, who had faced lions, armies, and flaming foxes, was now powerless. They captured him, blinded him, and dragged him to Gaza, throwing him into prison. And in that moment, the contrast was staggering. The man who once carried gates on his shoulders could not even stand on his own. His pride, his recklessness, and his human weakness had brought him to ruin. Yet even in his defeat, there was a glimmer of hope. God had not abandoned Samson completely. The story was far from over, and the stage was being set for an extraordinary act of redemption. Fire Samson's story is a stark reminder, strength alone cannot protect a man from his own choices. Even the most chosen, most gifted, and most powerful among us can fall if we follow desire over divine purpose. But true power, the kind that changes the world, is often hidden in weakness, in surrender, and in trust beyond oneself. Backhand index pointing right. Can a man so fallen rise again? Can the one betrayed and broken reclaim his destiny? Stay tuned for part 3, where Samson faces humiliation, captivity, and the test that will define his legacy forever. High voltage. Imagine a man who once tore a lion apart with his bare hands, who carried city gates on his shoulders, now blinded, chained, and humiliated before his enemies. Could the strongest man on earth rise from such brokenness? Samson's story takes a turn so tragic, so shocking, that it will make you question what true strength really means. High voltage. After the Philistines cut his hair and captured him, Samson's world changed overnight. No longer did the Spirit of the Lord fill him with unstoppable might. No longer could he crush 1,000 enemies alone. His eyes, once bright and fearless, were gouged out, leaving darkness where his vision had been. He was chained with bronze shackles, a prisoner in the very city whose gates he had once carried on his back. But worse than the physical pain was the humiliation. Samson was made to grind grain in the prison, an ordinary, backbreaking labor meant to break even the strongest spirits. Every day, he was mocked by his captors, paraded as proof that the mighty could fall. The Philistines rejoiced, throwing parties and celebrating the defeat of their enemy, sipping wine and laughing at the man who had once terrorized them. Yet inside Samson, something still burned. Though his body was weak and his eyes were gone, his heart, though broken, held on to a flicker of hope. He remembered the God who had chosen him before birth, who had given him power that defied logic, strength that no army could match. And in the darkness of that prison, Samson began to pray. His prayers were not boastful or arrogant. They were desperate, humble, and filled with sorrow. He admitted his failures, his foolishness, and his weakness. He begged for one final chance, one last surge of strength to turn the tables on the Philistines who had mocked him, humiliated him, and captured him. In that moment, Samson's human weakness met God's divine power, and a spark of possibility ignited. The Philistines, unaware of the quiet prayer rising from their prisoner, planned their greatest celebration. They gathered in the temple of Dagon, their god, to honor the victory over Samson. Thousands crowded the halls, drinking, laughing, and showing off their conquest. The temple pillars, tall, strong, and immovable, stood as symbols of their pride and arrogance. Samson asked for a young servant to guide him to the temple pillars. Leaning on the boy for support, he positioned himself between the two massive columns that held up the roof. Every eye in the temple was on him. The laughter of the Philistines echoed like thunder in his ears. And then, in a moment of complete surrender, Samson prayed once more, not for himself, not for glory, but for God to remember him, to grant him strength one last time. The Spirit of the Lord surged back into him. Muscles he thought were gone tightened, sinews hardened, and power unlike anything the world had ever seen coursed through his veins. With a roar that shook the temple, Samson pushed with all his might. The pillars cracked. The roof trembled. And in a single, climactic act, the temple collapsed, burying the Philistines beneath the rubble. Samson's death was a tragic triumph. He destroyed his enemies, avenged the humiliations he suffered, and fulfilled his divine purpose, but he paid the ultimate price. His body was crushed, his life ended, yet his faith, even in weakness, had unleashed God's unstoppable power. Samson's story is a raw, unforgettable lesson. True strength is not about muscle or might. It's about surrender, repentance, and trusting in God's power, even when the world has stripped you bare. Sometimes, the greatest victories come at the greatest cost. Backhand index pointing right. Can human weakness truly become the stage for divine power? In the next part, we'll explore the lessons of Samson's life, how pride, desire, and divine purpose intertwined, and how his story still speaks to us today. Don't miss it. High voltage. Samson's story doesn't end with the collapse of a temple. The lessons of his life echo through history, showing us the fragile balance between human weakness and divine power. What happens when a man chosen by God misuses his gifts? And what can we learn from both his triumphs and his failures? High voltage. Even in death, Samson left a mark that no one could ignore. The Philistines had been crushed under the weight of their arrogance, but Israel saw something deeper. Here was a man who had been flawed, reckless, and impulsive, yet had been used by God to deliver his people. Samson's victories were not just personal triumphs, they were divine interventions, proof that God's power could work through even the most humanly imperfect vessel. Samson's story became a cautionary tale. His strength, given by God, had been squandered at times because of pride, lust, and impulsiveness. Every betrayal, every rash act, every fiery vengeance reflected the danger of leaning on one's own power rather than God's. Yet at the same time, his final act, the destruction of the Philistine temple, showed the extraordinary potential of surrender. When he humbled himself, admitting his weakness and trusting in God, he became unstoppable. The people of Israel remembered him not just as a warrior, but as a symbol of hope. He reminded them that even when the odds seem insurmountable, God's power can prevail. His life illustrated the paradox of faith. The same man who was overpowered by human weakness could also achieve feats no ordinary man could imagine, all through divine strength. The story also highlighted the consequences of temptation. Delilah's betrayal was not just a personal tragedy, it was a warning about how easily desires and distractions can lead even the strongest astray. Samson's downfall came not from a lack of courage or might, but from giving in to human weakness and letting pride cloud his judgment. Yet within this caution lies inspiration. Samson's final prayer, whispered in a prison of humiliation, shows that redemption is possible even in the darkest moments. God's power does not abandon those who turn back to Him, even after failure. Samson's life teaches us that true strength is measured not just by physical feats, but by faith, repentance, and reliance on a power greater than oneself. His story resonates today because we all wrestle with similar struggles. The temptations, the pride, the impulsive decisions, they are human experiences that transcend time. Samson's life is a mirror, showing both the danger of ignoring God's guidance and the limitless possibilities when we surrender to it. Fire in the end, Samson's life is a story of contrasts, power and weakness, betrayal and redemption, pride and surrender. It challenges us to reflect on our own choices, our own sources of strength, and the ways in which we can either rise or fall depending on whether we follow our own desires or trust in God's plan. Backhand index pointing right. What can we take from Samson's incredible journey? How do his triumphs and failures speak to us in our own lives? In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the lasting lessons of Samson, lessons about faith, resilience, and the extraordinary power hidden within human weakness. Stay tuned. High voltage. Samson's life teaches us that true power is not in our muscles, our victories, or even our will, but in surrender, faith, and the courage to rise when we are broken. His story ends not in glory alone, but in lessons that echo through every generation. High voltage. After the collapse of the Philistine temple, Samson's name became immortal. Israel remembered him not only as a warrior but as a vessel of God's power. His body had fallen, but his legacy rose higher than any walls he had toppled. Through triumph and tragedy, God had used Samson's human weakness to demonstrate divine strength, showing the world that even flawed people can fulfill extraordinary purposes. The contrast in Samson's life is stark. His beginnings were miraculous, foretold by an angel, set apart for God, filled with supernatural strength. Yet his story was also marred by human impulses. Pride, anger, and desire led him into peril and betrayal. It's a vivid reminder that God's gifts can be wasted when we rely solely on ourselves. Samson's power, though astonishing, could not protect him from the consequences of his choices. But there is a profound truth in his final moments. When Samson acknowledged his dependence on God, prayed with sincerity, and let go of his own pride, the Spirit returned to him. In a single act of humility and faith, he accomplished what no one else could. His death was tragic, yet it became the ultimate testament to God's sovereignty. Even the weakest, most fallen man can be a vessel for miraculous power. Samson's story also reminds us that redemption often comes after failure. Life may blind us, chain us, and humiliate us, but surrender to divine guidance can restore purpose and meaning. His tale is not just about vengeance or destruction, it's about hope, restoration, and the extraordinary potential hidden within human weakness. Moreover, Samson challenges our understanding of heroism. True heroes are not flawless. They stumble, they falter, they fall, but their willingness to trust beyond themselves, to rely on God's strength, defines their legacy. Samson's name endures because he embodies both human imperfection and divine empowerment. His story warns, inspires, and uplifts, proving that even when we are broken, we can achieve greatness far beyond our own ability. Fire. Samson's life is a mirror for all of us, a reminder that strength without humility can lead to ruin, yet weakness with faith can unleash unimaginable power. His story teaches us to choose carefully, love wisely, and always remember that the source of true strength is not within our muscles, but within God. Backhand index pointing right. So, what does Samson's journey teach us today? How can we apply these lessons of faith, weakness, and redemption in our own lives? His story invites reflection, challenges our pride, and shows us that even in our most broken moments, God's strength can shine through. High voltage, what if the greatest battles we face aren't against lions, armies, or enemies, but against our own weaknesses? Samson's story isn't just history, it's a mirror for every one of us. It challenges, inspires, and shows the extraordinary power hidden in surrender and faith. High voltage. Long after Samson's death, his legacy lived on, not only in the stories of Israel but in the lessons his life imparted. His tale continues to remind us that strength is a double-edged sword. Physical power, talent, or natural ability may impress the world, but they cannot save us from our own choices. Samson's life reveals that without humility, wisdom, and faith, even the strongest among us can fall. Yet, his story also offers hope. In his darkest moments, when chains bound him and blindness shrouded his eyes, Samson turned to God. He prayed, he repented, and he surrendered his pride. That act of trust allowed him to achieve the impossible, showing us that true strength emerges not from what we can do alone, but from relying on a higher power. For modern audiences, Samson's journey resonates deeply. We live in a world that prizes power, fame, and independence, but often neglects the inner life, the humility, and the moral courage required to wield such gifts responsibly. Samson's life asks us to pause. Are we using our gifts wisely, or are we letting impulsive desires and unchecked pride lead us astray? His victories and failures are lessons etched in fire. Humility and faith amplify our potential, while selfishness and recklessness diminish it. The story of Samson also speaks to resilience. Life may blind us with disappointment, bind us with challenges, and surround us with mocking voices. But even in captivity, even in failure, there is a way to reclaim purpose. Samson's final act, destroying the Philistine temple, shows that surrendering to God does not make us weak, it makes us unstoppable in the right way. His life embodies a paradox: weakness can be the gateway to strength, humility to power, and brokenness to extraordinary impact. Fire Samson's journey is a call to self-reflection. It challenges us to identify our own Delilah moments, where temptation, pride, or desire could lead us away from our higher purpose. It reminds us that divine strength is available to everyone, but only when we acknowledge our limitations and turn to it. Every failure carries the seed of redemption, and every weakness, the potential for incredible triumph. Backhand index pointing right. So ask yourself, are you relying on your own strength, or are you open to a power greater than yourself? Samson's story isn't just about an ancient warrior, it's about the choices we make, the strength we trust in, and the legacy we leave. His life shows that even the most human among us can become instruments of extraordinary power when we embrace faith, humility, and purpose.